So, Michelle, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm great. It's 9 o'clock in the morning where I'm at. Where are you at?
I am in Missouri, so it's 11 o'clock.
Okay, so yeah, I just got my kids to school, so I'm back and I'm here sitting in my home office in Huntington Beach, California.
So I'm a stay-at-home dad. So it's been a very weird couple weeks for me because I've got a 5-year-old with autism, and so he just started kindergarten this year. And prior to that, he's been home most of the time, and I'm his main caregiver. So I've got about 5 hours in the middle of the day that I just don't know what to do with myself sometimes.
Don't complain about those hours. Do not complain about having those hours.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
Yes.
My son was born in the middle of the COVID lockdowns, and
Oh yeah.
well, right before the lockdowns. So for the first 2 years, he didn't really have any interaction with other people besides us, and it was kind of weird. But
Yeah.
I was looking through your profile, and it was like, man, this person has got an incredible story. So I actually wanted to, if you hadn't reached out to me and I found you, I probably would have reached out to you.
Oh, that's
So
great.
you are a mom of what you started calling a complex kid. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I have a complex kid myself.
Yes. See, this is the interesting thing, right? Like whoever has a complex kid knows what I'm talking about. They are complex kids. I was talking to a copywriter last week because I want to change my website. And she was like, "Do we have to explain? Don't we have to explain what a complex kid is?" And I'm thinking, well, maybe to you I have to explain that, but like parents that have a complex kid, they know that they have a complex kid.
Right.
So, but I'll tell you where that all came from. I have a 10-year-old son who was born premature, and I went into the hospital at 29 weeks because I went in to get an ultrasound and they said, "Oh my gosh, you have no amniotic fluid in there. I don't even know how this kid's still in there with you." So they rushed me to the hospital. I was there for 3 weeks. And then one day he had his heart rate went down so low for so long that they're like, "It's time to get him out." He was 32 weeks. He was 3 pounds, literally tiny little thing. And he stayed in the NICU for 4 weeks. He couldn't suck, swallow, and breathe at the same time. He had a G tube, but he could breathe on his own and all that stuff. So, having that as a first child, as you can imagine, like, okay, is this how it's gonna be? What? This is a lot. But as he grew, as he got older, we started noticing, like, he was a very fussy baby. He had um uh, GI issues, he had reflux, and then you go, oh, he doesn't like to eat. And then because he was in the NICU, he got followed every few months with the NICU center at the hospital that he was at. And we started seeing developmental delays, not hitting some milestones, like the hyperactivity, the attention issues. And we started seeing those things. And then when he was about 18, 20 months, I was like, something is off. Like, and I would go to my pediatrician all the time. I'm like, what? Like, something is going on. And, I got to a point where like somebody at the pediatrician's office was like questioning, is this woman just making this stuff up? Like, is she wanting this child to be sick? And I started getting all of these things from all over the place. And, but I knew it. There was something in my heart. And so I went and I searched and I got some help from an occupational therapist that was like, let's do some feeding therapy with him. And that was the beginning. And then he turned, through all of that, you go through the state funded programs here in California. And when he turns 3 years old, you transition it into the school district. I'm not sure. I think this is the majority. This is a nationwide thing with kids that have
Yeah, it's
disabilities.
similar here. We're in the Midwest.
Yeah. So once he transitioned into the school district, it was like, okay, it was apparent he wasn't talking. He grunted. He had no words. He couldn't even say mom or dad, mama, dada, none. And I decided to start looking around and trying to figure out, like, I need a really good speech therapist. And a friend of mine was a speech therapist, and she said, Michelle, you should reach out to Nancy Kaufman. Nancy Kaufman is like the guru of speech therapy. And I sent her a video of Drake. If anybody who listens, she is the apraxia queen. So there's Kaufman cards, which are used by the majority of the speech therapists in the world. And I reached out to her, and I get a call 2 days later. Michelle, this is Nancy Kaufman. I watched your video and I would love to help you, but I can't. Your son doesn't even have any sounds. So I need to send you to a friend of mine in Connecticut. And I was like, okay. So my daughter had just been born. She was probably 4 months old. I picked up my son. I left and we went to Connecticut to meet with this speech therapist. And we were there for 3 days. During this 3 days that we were there, like, it was very enlightening. I found out about sensory processing disorder. I found out about apraxia of speech. I found out about, like, just all of these things, right? And so the very first diagnosis my son had was apraxia of speech. Childhood apraxia of speech is what it's called. Then when we came back, they started questioning, does he have autism? Because he's not talking. So autism at that time, it was like they just label autism for anything really. And he was a very social kid. Like, he loved interacting with people. He had that one eye-to-eye contact, and I just did not believe that that's what it was. Okay. So and then we start speech therapy, and then you start occupational therapy, and then he goes into the school district, and then we find this speech therapist in LA, which is like an hour 15 minutes away from us because of traffic. And we start sending him to LA. We go through all of this, okay? And we just start getting diagnosis after diagnosis, and I just never it never fit. Autism never really fit with my son. And so I I kept fighting. And then it got to a point when he was about like 7 or 8 years old that I was like, you know what? We're probably never going to know what it is that he has. So, but it doesn't change what it is that we got to deal with. He's still not speaking correctly. He's still not learning the way that he should be learning. And so I fought and fought and fought, and I ended up getting a genetic testing when he was about 8 years old. And my insurance company finally covered it, and I was like, okay, let's do it. And so a week before Christmas, they said, hey, let's set up a time we need to talk. It doesn't have to be now, you can be after Christmas. I was like, no, let's just talk now. So we get on the phone and she goes, and I'm like, well, it's going to be negative because everything that we try is negative, right? Like, there's nothing out there. And she says, actually, it is positive. We found a genetic disorder for your son, and it is called TBR1. And I go, what? So at the time, they didn't apparently it had been a test for only about a year and a half at the time. So when he got tested, he was number 68 or 69 in the world with that diagnosis. And now he is one of 190.
Wow.
So that was 2 years ago. But you know, going through that process of trying to figure out what it is that your son has, that is a complex kid right there. Let's be honest, right? Going through all of that. But there are other complex kids out there that, might have just ADHD or might have a speech delay or might have autism or might have, there's so many things. And so when I came, that whole story was to come back around and say, when I came up with that complex kid name was I did not want to differentiate because you know why? Parents that have these kids, we connect in a way, we understand each other, we know how it is, and they're all in there. Like, we need the same support, so it doesn't matter. So that's
I,
why.
I think so. I think the struggle to find resources is something common between parents of complex children. Um, that's where I identify with your story the most. You had to go to Connecticut to find the best speech therapist you could find, and we face similar challenges in finding some occupational therapy outside of the school district. We Our little guy is very, very social. His personality does not match his diagnosis. His diagnosis does not define him, and it's very refreshing to see how free he can be while also accepting, learning, and adapting to his challenges. And he's only 5. So I can just imagine what he's going to be like when he's older. And as can you maybe go into a little bit more depth on TBR1, because I saw some information as I was doing some research. I saw some information that there's not much information out there. So
Exactly.
if you
Um,
could share a little bit more about what that is and what that means.
sure. So TBR1 is a part, it's basically, you're looking at the DNA sequencing. And there's a part of it, one of the sequences, it's called TBR1. This TBR1 is responsible for parts of the brain where it can cause some of the in many other things, um, intellectual disability, autistic traits, um, uh, epilepsy. Uh, there's and the developmental delays, speech delays, and it's all because of where that TBR1 would be a part of. It just makes up your brain, your learning processes, and those things. So, the one of the biggest things, so we participated into, we're in the study, it's called Simon Searchlight, and they try to do researches on these new genetic disorders that are popping up. But the truth of the matter is that there is nothing out there. We are the only ones, we live in California, and we are the only ones in Orange County with this disorder. Um, uh, not yesterday, on Sunday was TBR1 Awareness Day. And I decided to invite some people over that have TBR1 kids. There's 5 of us in Southern California. So 2 in Barstow, 1 in Long Beach, and 1 in San Diego. And we got the 5 kiddos that have it here at the house. And the difference in the type, like, it is really a spectrum of issues that they're carrying. One of the oldest ones that was diagnosed with TBR1 actually is from Long Beach. She was here. She's 24 years old. She doesn't speak. She doesn't walk. She still needs to be in a wheelchair. And so, but my son, on the other hand, speaks poorly. His speech is not complete. He walks, he runs, but he doesn't read, he doesn't write, and and he's 10 years old. And then there were two young little girls, a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. Neither of them walk yet. One is crawling, the other one is not. One is a little bit more present, the other one is not. And the spectrum of it is incredible to look. You can have one diagnosis, but it doesn't mean that everybody is going to look like the the diagnosis is not going to be exactly alike. So,
Right.
it was incredible to have them here. It was, I think it was a connection that we made as moms, and we gave hope to each other. We gratitude and all of those things came in place on Sunday. Had never met them. We just connected on Facebook and they all showed up at my house. I'm like, I feel like I already know you for a long time. So it was great. But like you were saying, there is nothing. I mean, I can sit here and I can tell you these are the things that happens, but there's nothing else.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So our struggles, our struggles happen when we interact with folks that really aren't educated about autism. So, like I mentioned, my son's diagnosis really doesn't fit his personality. So he's level two. Um, I think that's what they call it, level two autism. Um, so he does speak. He's very verbal. He's very social. He's
uh,
um, he's very independent. He his he's got very good fine motor skills. He learns very quickly. And so that kind of throws people off because he is extremely social, because he is extremely verbal and very intelligent.
uh-huh.
They often don't associate that he has some struggles in communication. He has some struggles in the communication is a big part because yes, he is very verbal, but sometimes he doesn't know how to communicate effectively, or he doesn't. If he needs help, he can ask for help, but it sometimes he doesn't know he needs help, and because he's very independent, and that's where a lot of our struggles happen is because his diagnosis doesn't outwardly present itself. And
Yeah.
sometimes that leads to safety issues within, he goes to public school. So there's some safety concerns that we have with um, sometimes a distracted teacher. He may just walk off. He's never done anything like that, but that doesn't mean he won't. I
Hmm.
need to, especially at a new place. It's the first couple weeks he's been in school. I need to ensure that he is comfortable with the people he's with, the place where he is, where he can go to the bathroom, and he can make it back, and though do all those things and be used to those things. I'm sure he can do it by himself. But I don't want I don't want anything to happen.
Of
And
course.
I don't want complacency to
Hmm.
affect safety. And I think that is a lot of the issues I have with the public school. But um, sometimes just with random strangers, I feel the need to kind of explain sometimes, well, my son, he has autism because he likes to touch people sometimes when we're at the grocery store. He loves to talk to people and he has no filters.
Yes.
And he like if he is curious about something, he will ask.
Oh,
And
for
I
sure.
love that. And actually the way I teach him how to handle things. If hey, if you're curious, just ask. So it's a lot less rude than just staring.
Yeah.
So um that's where we have difficulties. Do you have any difficulties maybe with is your son in public school?
He was. He is no
Okay.
longer because
So when he
yeah,
was in public school, did you have difficulties with communication with the administrators of the schools?
as you were talking, I had a few questions for you.
Absolutely.
Because
I'm an open book.
this is kind of what I do, and this is what I love to do is get people who don't really know what is going on to kind of getting clarity in certain things. So, first of all, is he in a general education class or is he in a special education class?
80% general education.
Okay.
So
Do
they remove him from the class 20% of the time, but he is it doesn't take it like if you present a new idea to him, he could pick it up just like that. And that's he is 80% on par with his peers. That's how I could present how he is. So we want to keep him in the classroom as much as possible.
Sure. Does he have an IEP yet?
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
he's had an IEP since his diagnosis.
Okay. Okay, great. That's a great start. What kind of services is he getting when you say that he's 20% out of the classroom? What are the services that he's getting outside of the classroom?
It varies. I think right now it's social and communication,
Okay.
some speech therapy.
Okay. Yeah. So you were talking about your concerns about having him in the school district and having him in the classroom. All of those things need to be addressed in the IEP. So if so I know that he's only just started a couple weeks ago. So probably in about a week or so, if I were you, I would reach out to the teacher and say, are we having these concerns? Is he having these issues? And if he is, and you are still worried about it, then there's a lot of things that they can do. One is it's an FBA, it's a functional behavior assessment, and to see is he a danger to himself? Is he a danger to other kids? And if he is, what are the safeguards we're going to put in place for him? And so they really, all of this needs to be addressed in the IEP.
Yeah,
Um,
we've actually done a lot of that. So one of the things that we've done is in his IEP, he has to have an adult walk him to class, and his teacher has to visibly see
great.
the handoff. Other than that, he doesn't really he doesn't need that much intervention as far as that goes. He's boy, it's hard to describe his his diagnosis more goes to his mannerisms and how um like sensory stuff, like he's got some sensory issues and stuff like that. He stims a lot and stuff like that, but he really doesn't have any difficulties learning. It's I don't think that he has a whole lot of safety issues. I think for the most part, it is communication. If he
Okay.
has those communication skills, I think he can communicate with adults what he needs when he needs it. And those teachers won't overlook him because he's being quiet, he's being good,
Uh-huh.
and doesn't appear to need anything.
Got it.
And that's what he's one of those kind of kids where if you don't pay attention, he might fall behind because he's not going to express that he needs help. And it's the things that I worry about are safety oriented at the beginning of school and at the end of school. That's pretty much it. And
Hmm.
when I tried to voice those concerns, we had already had it in the IEP that he
Hmm.
needed walked back and forth to class. And as we are trying to express that, I was getting pushback, and which immediately turned into a big blow up. And this was over summer school. And they had never once mentioned that they don't enforce IEPs in summer school, and they didn't tell us that until we went to drop him off. And that's
Uh-huh.
an immediate safety concern because we had no idea.
Oh, they should.
And so I removed him from summer school. And once we removed him from summer school, we got together with administrators and we were like, look, this this cannot happen because this is a major safety issue, not just for our son, but all the kids. And once we framed it that way, they kind of understood where we were coming from. So I think we got help in that direction. But
Mhm.
since then, we've also done some things here at home to help educate him on the things that he needs to do in order to ask for help. Communication. Hey, if you need help, ask someone, ask an adult, and it's working out pretty well.
That's good.
And I think 80% classroom time, I think that's pretty good for right now. If he starts falling behind any, I have all the faith in the world that we will be able to we will be able to affect change through his IEP. And that's very important that you brought that up because a lot of parents that I've spoke to have
No.
sometimes difficulties getting IEPs.
Yeah. Most parents, so some parents don't know that they can get an IEP. Some parents get an IEP, but they don't monitor their IEP. Some parents just go along with the ride for the ride. Okay, well, he needs an IEP. Okay. And um, when when we first started, when we first got the IEP, he was 3 years old. And because that's when you go into the school district and that's when they start doing all the stuff. So when we got into the school district, they wanted Drake didn't speak at all. And they wanted to give him one time a week, 20 minutes speech. And I was like, uh-uh, uh, speech therapy. If you want my son to talk, you're going to be seeing him at least 3 to 4 times a week. I'm sorry.
And
And
that's a
so
minimum.
oh, for sure. Like, and especially if the kid's not talking, like he grunted, like there were no words. And so, you know, those are things that parents don't know that is possible to get. So, ever since he was 3, he has had at least 3 times a week speech. Right now, he has 4 times a week speech at school. And we also have a private speech therapist. We actually now have two, but we have one private speech therapist she's been with us since he was about 4.5. And she has become his biggest advocate for speech therapy. So we actually just went back to her. She graduated Drake. She said, Drake is doing great. And so I think, because she's, of course, out of network, so we have to pay out of pocket to see her because the good ones, unfortunately, the ones that have the special that are specialized in certain things, they don't take insurance. Why would they? If, they're
Yeah.
going to get $70 instead of $200. So they don't need to. But anyway, she is amazing. And we just took him back because for 2 years, he really hasn't made any progress. And that's exactly how long it's been since we've been gone from her. And so we took him back, and here we go. I am back to fighting speech therapy again. I finally
Yeah.
got him into a school where I believe that it's going to be a great school for him, but you can't stop there. So that's the thing. So with your son, just don't be complacent. Don't just
Yeah.
don't just let them do what they're going to do. they do have good intentions, but they also have to abide by certain rules within the
Yeah.
school district.
So
So,
I think that advocating is the number one thing that it's important to do is advocate. And because so with our son, like I think that's the biggest thing that we always have to do is advocate for him because he can't advocate for himself. And I think I think sometimes there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it. And I think we have a situation in our school district where I think it was I think it's going to work out very well for him as he gets older going through the school district. I think that what kind of set the thing in motion over summer school and my safety concerns, I think what started that whole thing in motion was really honestly just a lack of communication between administration and parents. And it was a new school that he was going to. He was transferring from preschool to kindergarten
mhm,
and part-time to full-time. And while he's used to being home with me all day long. He was
uh-huh,
very emotional about starting school. He didn't want to start school. And it was more like, when we dropped him off, it was like, okay, see you later, mom and dad. We got him from here. And I'm like, do you though? Do you understand what is happening right now? Like may try to come out the door. I'm not sure.
uh-huh.
And I and I'm telling them he's never done it before, but that's something that we always have to be on the lookout for.
Yes.
And now everybody knows his name from like all the administrators know his name, and he's got a very unique name. His name is Rocket, so it's very
Oh
easy
my
to
gosh, I love that.
it's very easy to remember, and it fits his personality.
I was
So
gonna say the way you're talking, he is a rocket.
yes, yes, it very much fits his personality, and he's not a very he does have ADHD, but he's not disruptive.
Okay.
So his mind may wander,
Uh-huh.
but he's is so what's going to alert you is looking around and maybe not noticing him. And then, oh, how long has he been gone? Those are my concerns. And he's not a bad kid. He's a great kid. Behavior wise, he's a great kid. And
Lucky.
that's where the safety concerns come in is he going to be overlooked
Yeah.
because he's such a great kid? And that's I think we've got it now, but I think advocating is one of the best things. Like that's a have to thing for for parents with complex children is, and it's exhausting. Do you find it exhausting sometimes?
I so my day job, I am I do medical sales. So I work for a big orthopedic company and I do sales for them. I've been with them for 17 years. And I am grateful that I have the job that I have the flexibility to be able to advocate for my son. Because what happens is it takes so much of your time. And so one of the things that I've been doing and what I'm trying to do with Wisdom for Complex Kids is actually make the parents, teach the parents, how do you become your child's best advocate? You are the one that knows your son or your daughter the best. If you're going to expect that the school district is going to advocate for your child or that your pediatrician is going to advocate for your child, forget about it. Do you really think that they're going to? They will help you. I'm sure that they will. But a lot of times, unless you are doing it and you are asking the questions and you got to ask the right questions, you have to send the right emails with the correct tone on your emails. You have to look for for the perfect providers for your child. Those, unless you are asking those things, you're not going to be a proficient advocate for your child. But you are the one that knows your child the best. So that is the whole program that I teach. It's called Thrive. And it goes through a whole level of things just to make the parents understand that unless you do it, nobody else is going to do it.
Absolutely. That's exactly that. Yes. So
Yes.
I've got three boys with ADHD. Um,
Okay.
two diagnosed, one, my son with autism. He's not been diagnosed with ADHD, but it's very, very obvious.
Uh-huh.
But I've got three boys with ADHD. I have ADHD myself, and it's it's challenging sometimes because we all have different needs. And my children, they're all different kids and they all have individual needs apart from their combined needs. And one of the things that I've always struggled with is how to bounce back and forth between children without treating them the same because it is exhausting. Because I don't have, and I'm a stay at home dad. And how I became a stay at home dad is because each of my children require so much different attention, and it's almost like I have to be right now. My oldest son has moved out of the house. So I've got four kids total. I've got one girl and three boys. My oldest daughter she's 21. My oldest son is 20, and my middle son is 14 going on 15, and my youngest son is 5.
Oh my gosh, look at you.
So
Oh,
I've got all the all those ages, and so it's almost like I have to put on a different hat each with each kid and with that
oh, especially
conversation.
with that gap. What were you
Exactly.
thinking?
I wasn't I wasn't to be honest with you, but I couldn't ask for a better life, to be honest with you. And
Oh,
I,
that's so
I'm
good.
too now trying not to get emotional at the moment. To put things in words, it's very difficult to explain to people my life because everything is great until it's not. And then when it's not, it's still pretty good.
Yes.
And when I have to remind myself of that as things are going in my mind, as things are going to shit, I have to remind myself, like, hey man, my life is still pretty good. It could be worse. It could be a lot worse.
Yes.
And that's how I make it through my days sometimes, is just reminding myself of all the positive things in my life. And I think a lot of times society has a difficulty doing that as a whole. Um, just focusing on the things that we do have
Uh-huh.
instead of the things that we don't have. And
Yes.
one of the things that I have in abundance is people. I have a lot of people in my life,
Yeah.
and a lot of people that care. It may not always be obvious sometimes,
Uh-huh.
but I've got a lot of people in my corner that pull for me
Yeah.
and that cheer me on from the sidelines. And it feels good. It does feel good. And I just have to remind myself of that all the
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
because wearing those different hats, it's it's sometimes I forget to turn that hat around when I'm talking to the second child, and I'm
Yeah.
uber aggressive with the second child. And like it's like then he looks at me and he says, Dad, what are you talking about? And
Uh,
so and then I'm like, oh, turn that hat around. I
yep.
forgot
Hang
who I
on.
was talking to, and this is how we
Yeah.
handle this situation. And I spend a lot of time. So my wife isn't around a whole lot during the week because she has to work a lot.
Uh-huh.
to maintain our, for a lack of a better word or lack of a better term, our way of life through rough
Okay.
economic times. She has to work her tail off. And so she's not around a whole lot during the week, but on the weekend she is. And she does a pretty good job of handling this kid, then moving to this kid to move into this kid. And I try to tell her all the time, I'm like, hey, you do this really well. Take it off my hands.
Yes.
But
Yes.
then I have to remember, like, hey, she's got all this stuff during the week that she's got to deal with, and I lose sight of the fact, and I'm selfish sometimes about that. Like as soon as she walks in the door, I'm like, here, take them.
Yes. 'Cause
And
you're tired of you've been dealing with it all day.
I get auditory I get um uh, auditory overwhelmed a lot, like
Okay.
sounds,
Uh-huh.
like so I have so many different sounds going on all at once. My son, my 5-year old, he likes to have his tablet.
Uh-huh.
Most of the time he's not paying attention to it and it's just running. It's just
Uh-huh.
on making noise. And he has two televisions in the house going on different things, and they're pretty loud. And then
Oh my gosh.
I got a 14-year-old in the house asking me questions all the time.
Yeah.
And then I've got my own things that I'm trying to do. And so I get overwhelmed just by noise sometimes. And it's just like I want to go somewhere quiet,
Yes.
just for 10,
For a few
15
minutes.
minutes even.
Yes.
Yeah. And what I have difficulty sometimes is not attacking my wife when she walks in the door and being like, here, take them, I'm done. But
Yes.
it's getting better. I'm trying to work on those things.
Yeah. So, as you were talking, I was thinking of, and this is my favorite part to talk about, on the whole program when I'm helping the parents and all of that, but it's celebrate the small wins. Um, I'm sorry, my gardeners just got here. I don't know if you can hear them, but it is
Oh no,
super.
I can't hear them.
Okay, good. All right. I'm like, I have a Yeti, so sometimes it picks up everything around the house. And so, anyway, but the biggest thing is celebrating the small things, right? So the latest one that I had was my son's 10, okay? And we have never been able to go on a hike. And we would get in the car, we would go somewhere, and then we couldn't get anywhere because he's running this way, or or he's melting down in the car, or something happens. So about a month or so ago, we were like, let's go on a hike. And we went on a hike for the very first time in 10 years, And so that alone, I remember looking at him and he was walking our dog, and I remember looking and going, holy shit, we did it. Right? And so I posted it on my Facebook and I'm like, these are the small things that we have to celebrate, because if not, life is going to be pretty sucky when you have these complex kids in your life, because they will melt down, they will have issues, you will have to fight for them, you will have appointments galore to take them to, but you have to celebrate those small improvements, the small things that they are able to do, or even that you have held your peace and you accomplished by yourself also. So celebration has to happen in my book.
Absolutely. As you were talking, I had a thought about and that goes for not just the complex children, but all children and also adults, because those small wins sometimes as parents, that's all we get.
Yes, yes, it's true.
So I I had a quick question about I had a quick question about TBR1.
Okay.
Is
That's okay.
that
Answer.
I one of the things that I had looked up, as I was looking up TBR1, the Google search as it's automatic, it gives you search suggestions.
Sure.
One of the search suggestions was TBR1 mortality rate. And I clicked on that out of curiosity. Is there anything I didn't really see anything that was from any reputable sources that was saying anything. Is there anything connected with TBR1 a mortality rate?
Not that I know of. I
Okay.
have not heard. And one of the things that they do, there's a great resource from and I can send that to you later, but you know, TBR1 kids don't look different. You cannot, like, just by looking at your kids, you cannot tell that they're different. And so there is, I have not heard of mortality of deaths being
I think
associated
maybe the
with
reason why
TBR1.
that happens, I think maybe the reason why that happens is because maybe people are researching for information, and that's one of the things that they are researching for. I should have put that together before I asked,
Uh-huh.
because once I went back to that link, because I've got Google here in front of me, once I went back to that link, it absolutely made sense because then it clicked in my brain that like maybe people are searching this and parents have concerns when they get those diagnoses
Yes.
because there's not too much information out there. So they ask these type of questions because of maybe fear of the unknown.
What's the
And
outcome?
exactly. And my son, when we got his diagnosis, we kind of embraced it. We kind of knew anyway that, um, but we didn't. We really kind of got the diagnosis, so we knew how to um, educate him moving forward. And it wasn't really for us; it was really um, for a lack of a better term, maybe like the IEP and situations like that, make it easier for us to educate him differently than a mainstream child.
Sure.
And I forgot where I was going with that.
So good. No, you were talking about mortality rates and kind of
Oh,
where
yes, yes. When I was
um
talking about
knowing the outcome.
diagnoses. Yes.
Yeah.
Some of the questions that we get is how we handle the diagnosis so well. And I don't know. I sometimes don't know how to explain this to people any other way than we just we just move on. It's not a life-ending thing for us. Even if it was a life-altering thing, like our son may have a our son may not live as long as children without autism. That wasn't even a question in our minds. That's something that hey, we'll deal with that when we get there. And we have kind of a sunny outlook on things anyway. And a lot of folks ask us, how did you deal with the diagnosis when you found out? Because a lot of people are all doom and gloom and, oh no, what are we going to do? And I don't, it was just normal for us. It's hard to
Yeah.
explain how it is. And
So
I was
I
curious as to what your experience was when you felt that, when you got that diagnosis.
sure. So for me, when we got the diagnosis, this is me personally. I don't think that this was with my husband, but this personally. I I felt guilty that it was my fault that he had these things. So I know this is going to sound insane to people, but did I drink too much Dr. Pepper when I was pregnant with him? Did I eat too much Taco Bell? Is that why he ended up this way? Did I not count the kicks like I was supposed to? Had I gone to the doctor sooner, like would that have made a difference? Like I was in my head something that I had done caused all of these issues for him throughout the years. So when I got the diagnosis, it was actually like kind of a weight off because it was conception. Like it wasn't anything that I did afterwards. So that was the first thing. Um, but I want to go back to when we first started noticing things. The big diagnosis didn't come until he was like 8 years old. But when he was young, knowing that there was an issue, trying to figure out what the issue was, that was the hardest part. Knowing TBR1 was probably, for me, it was like a weight off my shoulder. And it was an explanation for everything that we had been going through. And it was like, oh my gosh, now we know that it wasn't like it's not, this is the reason why.
And we
Um,
know how to move forward.
there's there we're there's nothing we can do differently, but now we know that this is it. But the worst part was when he was 3 years old and we did not know what was going on. That was the hardest part, not knowing. And then you get one diagnosis and then you move on and you go, okay, well, we're treating that diagnosis, but now there's the behavior and the ADHD. Oh my gosh, so we need to treat the ADHD because he won't sit down to have speech therapy. So how's he going to have speech therapy if he can't even sit down on the chair? So then you have to go and you have to treat the ADHD to be able to use for speech therapy. And then you go the same thing with the occupational therapy and all of those things. But the hardest thing is when you have an expectation, especially first child. For us, he was our first. You have these expectations for your kids when you're pregnant or when you're about to get pregnant, or you know what I mean? You kind of, okay, well, we're looking forward to having a kid in the house, but you really don't know how it's going to be. And what happens is when you get something, a curveball thrown at you, how do you react to that? How do you, like, I know for my husband, it was really hard for him to realize that our son's probably never going to play sports. My husband is a huge sports fan. He played sports his whole entire life. He can sit here and talk to you for 3 hours about sports. And I see your Kansas City Chiefs over there on the side,
Go
and he would,
Chiefs.
yeah, well, we're like go Eagles over here in the house.
Hey,
So,
we like the Eagles here too. So,
okay, great. All right. So we can talk about we can do that.
but
But
I'm actually from Kansas City, or well, we live an hour north of Kansas City, so Kansas
okay.
City Chiefs home team. So I grew up a Chiefs fan. My parents were Chiefs fans. And I'm a big sports nut too. But so
Okay.
go ahead, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, so for him to realize that our son is not going to play basketball. He hates soccer, like even, the special leagues soccer. Like and so all of those things are kind of the issue, right? So you
Right.
look at it and then you go, how am I going to deal with this? So you have to adjust your expectations, and that is really hard to do. So in the beginning, you have these set of expectations, they're like up here, and then you kind of have to adjust them. They're going to be different sets of expectations. So for me, like when my son said mama, I cried. You know what I mean? And he was 4 years old. So, you know, different set of expectations. So,
Yeah. So our son was actually walking at 9 months old. He started doing most everything early. And as far as talking goes and verbalizing, he was a little. delayed on the actual speech part. But he started making noises and mimicking very, very early. But it was just that communication, knowing what words are and how to say them and stuff like it was a challenge. I had to get him to look at my lips
Yes.
and I had to make gestures, daddy, and stuff like that. I had to teach him those things phonetically. And it's very funny. My wife and I were just discussing this morning, I believe it was, or last night. But he reads. He's learning to read phonetically. When he goes to get a book, he will search for the video of
Mm-hmm.
someone reading the book and he'll follow
Okay.
along.
Wow.
And he's doing that on his own at 5 years old.
It's amazing.
And I told my wife, I said, you know what that is, right? And she said, what? And I said, phonetic, phonetic learning. That's phonics.
Yes,
And she said, really? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what and the fact that he's doing that on his own without prompts, without somebody showing him, it shows us that he's interested in learning and curious.
for sure.
And that's going to be great to watch that because it's so amazing the changes that happened in him between learning at home and
Yeah.
learning in a school environment with educators. I'm not an educator. I don't have a formal education past high school.
Mhm.
So I don't really have the training that it takes to uh, teach children other than what I need to teach them to communicate. That's pretty much the only thing I know how to do. And I don't even do that effectively. So it's, it was amazing to see the changes in him between our house
Yeah.
and school and how much he learned so quickly. and
Mhm.
and that's I don't really have I never really had any positives about the public school system until my youngest son is going through the public school system because there's so many programs that are available and so many educators that he has access to that he does not have access to outside of the school system
Yes.
unless we travel to like Connecticut or
Yes.
Texas or California for
Yeah.
different services, different experts. And
Hmm.
one of the things that COVID did, it has actually made communicating across the country quite a bit easier. Like
Oh,
you're in California right now, I'm in
yes.
Kansas City. So
Yes.
it's quite amazing the amount of things that as I'm looking for resources, I couldn't
Hmm.
find any resources, traditional resources. But
Hmm.
once I started looking outside the box at
Yeah.
things, okay, this is what I need. How do I get this? And
Hmm.
then putting those feelers out there. Hey,
Hmm.
if you know somebody, give me a call. Hey, if you know somebody, give me a call.
Hmm.
And networking and stuff like that, and talking to people like you and getting your story and how you work through things. I
Hmm.
find that stuff extremely helpful in our journey, so to speak. But it's not really my main goal for all my children is to make sure my children can live without me before I go. And
Hmm.
I have to start now
Yes.
because tomorrow's not a promise.
Yes.
And I want my little guy, I want him to make it without me because I'm not going to be here forever.
I know.
Mom's not going to be here forever. And without us, we are his biggest advocates.
Yeah.
And without us, he's on his own pretty much. And I want him to be able to be okay.
Hmm.
And if I need to set up safeguards for him, as like some parents may have to have a trust in place to do those kind of things. If I have to do that, I'd rather find out now. you know
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So one of the things that, so the state of California is great. Like we have some amazing resources. I actually look back and like at, 20 years ago when I moved down here, I'm like, there was a reason why I moved down here. There's a reason why I pay so much damn taxes on living in California. But like, if I were to move to another state, I know that the state funded programs are not as good. So, one of the things that we did as soon as we got the diagnosis was go through the state, and it's called the Regional Center here in California, and they deal with the disability, for kids and adults. But what they do is, so they provide services under three. They provide services between three. They help with certain things between the ages of 3 and 18 while they're in school. But after school, like when they turn 18 years old, they are required to help the kids who are in the program. What that means is, for example, I'm not here. Something happens, and who knows? Of course, my expectation is for my son to have, you know, to be able to work, to be able to do these things, to be part of society. But if by any chance I'm not here and something happens to him or something happens to us, the state, they provide adult transition programs. They do all of these things for the kids who are disabled, quote unquote. So that was one of the very first things that I did, was to make sure that he's set up for the future, because we really, if we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. And so, and then, because mine is a little bit more of a complex thing, like we were able to get through the regional center, and we think, that is one of the most grateful, like I am grateful for that, that he will be taken care of, in the future if we're not here. And so, but those are things, of course, that you don't want to think about, but you have to think about.
Yeah, that's something we've all got to think about. And it's not just the parents of the complex kids that have to think about that. It's all parents.
Yes.
And that's so I like to talk. I don't really like to talk about it, but I like to kind of highlight that sometimes, because when my mom passed away 9 years ago. I was totally unprepared for that.
Uh-huh.
She didn't warn us it was coming or anything. She's 56, so she was very
Oh,
young. And it was like, when it happened, I was like, gosh, I just asked my mom for gas money last week, you know,
yeah.
and I know how I felt, unprepared. And I want my kids to know that, hey, look, no, dad's not going to be here forever. And we've got to educate you. We've got to teach you some stuff, because like, if I don't teach you now, I'm going to forget. And
Yeah.
it's, that's one of the stresses in my life that it probably doesn't need to be stressed about, because I stressed about it so much in the past, and I have that experience of my mom passing away and not being prepared for that. Um, but I find I find it difficult sometimes to just remove the the not necessarily remove it, but to deal with the stigma sometimes, because our child is so um it is so unconventional. Like, for a lack of a better, he's not he does his diagnosis doesn't outwardly present itself. And so those challenges that we face, just 5 years old now, I'm hoping, as time goes on, with the resources, with the networking that I've done, with the experiences that I've heard about, like with you and your son and your family's trials and tribulations, I'm hoping that I can gather all that information up
Hmm.
and use that knowledge to prepare my child forward, and share that knowledge. That's one of the reasons why I do this podcast, is because it's going to be here forever and my kids can watch this anytime they want, whether
That's,
I'm here or not.
yes,
And so
I love it.
um I think of it kind of like you know, it kind of like uh because my I have a voicemail from my mother and I listen to that sometimes, but it's the only thing I have that I
Hmm.
can hear her voice. And this video, as long as YouTube's up, you know, this video will live on forever.
Yes.
And and I think about those things as I'm talking to people such as yourself and getting those experiences so I can pass them down not only to my children, but people, other parents who may be in the same situation as you, or maybe in the same situation as me, because while we have similar situations, our situations are different, are very different. You have to do 10 times the amount of advocating for your son that than I have to do for my son. But I've got three boys, you know, that all needed advocating for. And it's that's why I like these conversations. And that's mainly the reason why I don't script these podcasts, is because I want it to be raw. I want you to feel comfortable talking to me like you would your neighbor. And to you know how much division is out there on social media.
Oh,
I don't see that when I walk out my front door. And when I go out into public, I don't see all that division. And we need to make the internet a nicer place, I think.
I agree. I agree. It's just too much crap out there that we probably don't need. There's so much good in the world that we should be looking at instead of
Yes.
looking at all the bad. I actually have a really hard time even looking at news and listening to the news and doing all these things because like, you know,
I
I
think
mean,
news ruined social media for me.
oh, everything is just it's just too much. Let's just be kind, be nice, and the world would be a much better place if you're not pointing fingers and judging others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It would be, I was speaking with someone that lives out there on the West Coast. And they were talking about their experiences out in public. They don't, they said that division is prevalent where they live out in public. And I'm like, man, I couldn't imagine living in a place like that where like everywhere where I go out in public, everyone is so not like, this is a Midwest. So I mean that's pretty evident when you go out in public here, but everybody's nice to each other. There's no like, there every now and then you'll see somebody
Yeah,
arguing or something like that, but it's not, it's things aren't divisive out in public
yeah,
and like they are on the internet. I don't see hardly any, even in the political sphere, even when you go outside in public and somebody, you could be walking next to a person and know exactly what their political affiliation is, and you still have a great conversation with them. And
mhm,
that open dialogue, that open conversation between people, I think we need to get back to that on the internet, in real life. I think if people were nicer to each other and understood that, hey, my thoughts and feelings aren't going to match your thoughts and feelings sometimes. We're not going to agree on everything, but hey, we can be nice to each other and have thoughtful conversations and good conversations over a cup of coffee, if you will, and you know, have just open dialogue like this.
for sure, for sure. So I feel like a lot of times people, so I'm from Brazil and I have never felt discriminated upon. So, I mean, I don't know if it's just that I don't interact with people that will discriminate me or if it's um I don't know, but I don't feel that at all and I'm from Brazil. So,
That's awesome. I and
I
I
don't know.
really I really, well, one of the things, and it's kind of neat that you're from Brazil, because one of the things I like to talk about on the show is uh, different cultures and different countries and how things are similar and how things are different, how we raise kids differently and parenting styles. And I just love it. I have a curiosity about everything. I'm just naturally curious about everything. So I love talking to people from different cultures and stuff. And when you said you were from Brazil originally, I was like, wow, that's kind of neat, you know? So do you remember what it's like in Brazil?
So, I only lived there until I was 17, but my family is there. So I still go back and so my Brazil is probably it's a different Brazil than what it is now. I'm sure that it is because that was, 30 years ago. But and my Brazil is from a perspective of a teenager because that's when I was there. And so my Brazil was great. Like, of course, we had all of, we had one of the most interesting things about my Brazil was that we changed currency, I think 4 or 5 times in my lifetime. Imagine you saying dollars are no longer, if you have $3,000, it's now going to be worth 3x dollars now. And then you change the name in a way. So we had Cruzeiro, we had Cruzado, we had so many different currencies in Brazil through my years that I was there. So that is one thing I remember. And I also remember that we impeached a a president when I was in my, I don't know if I was in high school yet, quite yet. But those are like, and then I remember the amazing concerts that we used to go on the weekends and how fun it was, hanging out with my friends and being at the beach in the summertime. I mean, I
Did you
have
ever
a
go to Rio?
So my daughter's name is Rio. I we used to go to Rio, the state of Rio. There's a smaller town called Cabo Frio, which is about 2 hours. It's a 2 hour drive from Rio that you would know, the big Rio with the Christ and all that. But it's still in the state of Rio. So there's the city and then there's the state of Rio. And so we always drove by, we would stop by there. And so I'm very familiar with that area. And
Yeah,
I
some of
just,
the reason why I asked is some of the largest concerts in the world are in Rio de
Rock in
Janeiro.
Rio.
Yeah.
I I lived through the very first one, which is, I think it was 1984 or 85. It was the very first one. And it was a big deal in Brazil because it was the very first time in many years that that Brazilians were able to vote because we were under a military dictatorship for many years. And so that year, it was the year that Brazil actually elected their very first president in this whole thing. So, I mean, that is the Brazil I know. There's so many other things happening right now in Brazil. And the Brazil I know now is my dad and my family because that's what we go there to do, is to see them. I miss Brazil. I miss the people. I miss the culture. Everybody's so nice. Everybody hugs and kisses. And, it doesn't matter if you've never met that person, you're going to kiss and you're going to hug. And everybody's just so open. And if you're feeding one person and they go, oh, I got to bring somebody else, and that's totally fine. Just the more the merrier. That's Brazil to me. That is the true Brazil to me. And we have a lot of issues. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of, I think, racial and social issues in Brazil. But That's not what I know. And I prefer to keep it that way, if you know what I mean. The
Absolutely. I do know what you mean. I miss quite a bit of the togetherness that we used to have here, the unity, I still say, it takes a village.
oh, for sure.
And I don't really have, I don't really have much of a village um, that I see on a daily basis, except for my family that I live with. But I say that it takes a village, and they're really kind of it's really kind of true. And that's probably what you see in Brazil quite a bit now is still that village. And I do see as an individualistic society here in the United States that like we do have like we have our villages, but we're individuals. And
Yeah,
I think it'd be kind of neat if our culture kind of, you know, reverted back to the neighborhoods and everybody knows everybody and don't be a stranger type mentality and stuff like that. I really miss all that.
the kids
Um
play outside, you know,
yes,
that
yes.
type of thing. Yeah. We're pretty lucky here in Huntington Beach, where I live. We just don't have a lot of kids because it's just there's a lot of older people that live around here because they've had these houses for so many years. But it's a safe environment. Like we've left the kids leave their bikes in the front yard for days and it's never taken. And so I I'm grateful and I'm lucky to be able to live in a place like this because I know that that's not how it is everywhere in this country. And it's definitely not the way that it is in Brazil. No, no way. So, but yeah, you were talking about having a village, and I'm going to go back just because this is kind of how it started this conversation, but I'm going to go back to my son because it takes a village to raise a child like that. And I know that you brought that up, but when you don't have family around, it makes it really, really hard to do that. And so you have to find that village and it's not just with him. I'm not, I went back to that because but it is, I don't know, you just need a village for everything. Yes. Yes.
Yes, I say that all the time. And so when I first started this podcast, one of my first episodes was Where's My Village? And I think I kind of rubbed some people the wrong way and ruffled some feathers in my
Uh-huh.
village because I got a handful of phone calls from family members that had listened in and they're like, "Hey,
Uh,
we're here. What about us?" And I'm like, "Okay, no offense to you or anything, but those type of things isn't like that's not really what I'm talking about. I know I can call you in an
yeah,
emergency and
yes,
you will be there for me. But what about Tuesday when I'm about ready to pull my hair out and I have nobody or you're at work or that's the type of village that I'm talking about. I don't really have family members that I can just go to and hang out with and say, "Hey, can you hang out with me for a little bit so that I can get some peace?" I don't
uh,
really I don't really
yeah,
have that when I need it.
uh-huh.
Now, I have that when my family or my village is available, but after I started the podcast and I expressed those things, my village started getting slowly bigger, and we've um, we've gotten a little bit closer to some family members that we weren't necessarily close to before due to our feeling like we didn't have a village and them feeling like, oh, I had no idea you felt that way. Let's get together. So, um, we expanded our village a little bit, and
Yeah.
it that is absolutely true that you do need a village. And like you were saying, it's not just with your son, it's
Mm-mm.
with all the kids.
Everybody.
And I try
Yes.
to remember that as I'm talking with my daughter.
Hmm.
I'm a grandfather now, and my
My
daughters,
gosh. You're
yes.
way too young for that.
Oh
Woo.
no, no, no. I don't think of it like that. I'm so I go on the you so I'm not religious, but Christians have a saying, go forth and multiply.
Yes.
Um I I think children are great. I really do. And having kids young allowed me to still be be very active with them
Hmm.
through their childhoods, except I wasn't with my older children. I gotta admit that. But that's actually where the name Coffee with Bearded Bad Dad comes from, is because I'm not the best dad. I've never claimed to be the best dad. I'm not perfect. But where I think I am a good dad is I'm here. I try,
Yeah.
and I think that's what matters. So to kind of wrap that whole thought up, it's like sometimes folks get so wrapped up in their own personal lives that
Oh, sure.
they don't often think about reaching out to loved ones or reaching out to friends and saying, "Hey, do you need help?"
Yes.
Because oftentimes, sometimes we're all struggling to make ends meet, or we're all struggling to keep our sanity sometimes, or we're all just busy and overwhelmed. And that's another reason why I started the podcast here, so I can keep up with family and friends a little bit
Yeah.
easier. So
That's good.
so
Yeah.
um but I have one more question about Brazil. So one of the things that has come to my attention in recent years with Brazil is UFOs. Do you know anything about UFO?
That's more than I know.
No? Okay. Okay. So,
No.
so
Tell me. Enlighten
so
me.
the Brazilian government has had some open door sessions on UFOs and UAPs like we have here in the United States, but
Yeah.
in Brazil they're a little bit more open about it. And I didn't know. But you had said Brazil, and that piqued my interest because sometimes they're in the news quite a bit. In my world, they're in the news um, for UFO legislation or UFO meetings and stuff like that in the government. And I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that. But
I didn't even know about that.
do you know that stuff is in the news here in the United States?
Well, I see it every once in a while, but I didn't know that Brazil was open about this. I had no idea. So,
I think they're a little bit more open than the United States is, because I do think the United States has ulterior motives for keeping it quiet, whether it be um for legend. So if you know anything about the CIA, there's the CIA has legend, and that's what makes the legend so good, is because it's secret. Nobody knows. And so when they have their successes, they don't tell anybody about it.
uh-huh.
And when they have their failures, they cover it up. So the CIA is a mystery. And that mystery creates a legend of its own. And so whether the United States does those things with the UFO subject for those purposes or some other purpose, it's pretty obvious that they have ulterior motives. And Brazil is just more open about those type of things because they don't have ulterior motives. They're just like, hey, we see these orbs up in the sky and they're bright. They look like stars just flying around. We don't know what they are. We got to figure that out. And it may be because the religion in Brazil is quite a bit more open there too.
Yeah. I honestly, I had never even heard about that in Brazil. And like I said, I haven't been there in 30 years. So, maybe these things are in the news. I did not know. I might have to ask my brother about it.
So you know how news here is in the United States. If it is in the news from a different country, it's there for like 10 minutes and then
Yes, and then it just
it's
goes away.
done. Yeah.
Yeah.
The news cycle's so fast here, especially Monday through Friday.
When,
If an article comes out on Wednesday and it doesn't grab headlines immediately and nobody blows it up into a big deal, it's forgotten about by Wednesday evening.
yeah, that's true.
And it's absurd, but it is true. And there are a lot of stories out there in the media, in the news that you get tired of hearing about every
Hmm.
day. And
Yeah.
they just won't let some of them go. Whereas this one over here, you're really interested about, and you can't find any information. That's my experience anyway. But yeah, that's the question I had about Brazil. It just popped out in my mind because one of the things that I'm really interested in my personal life is UFOs. It's podcasts and UFOs for me. Oh, and sports. I love sports too. Like you were mentioning about your husband, he's a big sports fan. I, and I've forgotten about that until just this moment. But one of the things that we have here locally to us is the Kansas City Chiefs sponsors what they call challenger leagues around
Okay.
here. And flag football is the name of the game.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
it's they sponsor these local teams of kids and they're all inclusive teams, which means, and I do believe they are more targeted towards children that can't get on other sports or don't do well in other sports. And I've seen wheelchairs out on the field. I've seen all kinds of stuff. It's a good time. We've been out there, and we have stuff like that. I don't know in your area. What's the closest professional sports team you guys have there?
So we have the Angels, well, they used to be the Anaheim Angels, but they're the LA Angels, but they're just right here. They're in Orange County, actually. And then we have the Lakers, the Clippers, I'm about 20 miles south of LA.
Okay, so you've got the
So,
Rams, the Chargers, just a short jog across, what
yes.
is it, 4 hours from Vegas?
From Vegas, yes. And my husband's actually from Vegas, so we go
Yeah,
up
and
there quite a bit
so you
for
got the Vegas Raiders right there as well. So,
open.
one thing I might, give you an idea for those sports leagues is reach out or just kind of maybe even Google on sports teams in your areas to see if they sponsor any leagues like that.
Yeah,
Any Play 60 with the NFL, they have that Play 60. So maybe sometime somewhere in your local area, they may have some Play 60 um, sponsored programs, and that's what the Kansas City Chiefs Challenger League. It's a Play 60 sponsored thing.
yeah,
So uh, reach out and to them and see if maybe they have something for your little guy,
yeah.
because that might be interesting for him and dad.
We do AYSO soccer, and they do have a special needs league. So he's in that. They make sure that they all score a goal and they, just all of those things. So like that's the one thing that he likes to do because he has his friends from when he was little. They all come, and so that's his little social thing that he does. And so he really enjoys doing that. Not so much the soccer, but being with his friends twice a week. He really enjoys that. So, and it's again, it's the village, right? Those moms, those kids, they are truly our village, because they understand where we are, what we have at our house, and who Drake is. And so, like, there's an understanding there, and I love them, and so we do that. But I know that they have some programs. I always see out here programs. I think my husband, I think he's going to focus with my son on hunting over sports now. So we'll see how that goes this year.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great skill to have,
Yes.
and and not only is it a great skill to know how to hunt, but it could teach patience. It
Yes.
could teach respect for other living animals, such as like if you so let's just use deer for instance. That respect that the hunter has is second to none in my experience. I grew up with hunters. I'm not one personally, but I know a lot of hunters, and that's one of those things that they had the moral respect for animals and other living creatures,
Yeah,
um, and the time spent with your son
for sure.
that your
For sure.
husband will have will be
Yes.
amazing, because if they get a kill, they get to dress that kill. They get to pray over that kill.
Yeah.
They get to discuss what those things mean in not only our culture, but your culture as well. And I
Mhm.
think that's a special thing and a special bond between father
Yes.
and son. And that's very cool. That's very cool.
Yes.
And you mentioned soccer. Isn't it incredible how huge soccer's gotten here in the last
Oh my
couple of
gosh.
years? It's been
Yes.
it's been wild to see that. I'm not a big soccer fan myself, but I know that football, soccer
Yep.
is bigger. It's the biggest sport in the world,
Mhm.
and it never quite caught on here,
No,
and it's become huge here over the last couple years.
somebody was talking about the Messi effect in the United States. So it sounds like him coming here, it's really has changed the soccer, the way that people view soccer, and I love it because I love soccer. I love it. So we went to I'm Brazilian, and so this is crazy. And I'm gonna say this anyway. I had never been to a soccer game until Copa America. That was in Brazil was playing. Oh my gosh, now I can't even remember who it was. But we went to the Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas and we watched them. That was my very soccer, like my very first Brazil soccer game. And it was so fun because we won and it was beautiful. And my whole family, we were all dressed up in Brazil colors. And it was really, really fun. And I can't wait for the Olympics to come to LA so I can watch them here in 4 years. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, Allegiant Stadium, and it's one of the best new venues in the world, I think,
Oh,
in my
Allegiant and
opinion. And
SoFi,
I'm
SoFi is amazing.
I'm a Raider hater. That's what they call us. I'm Kansas City Chiefs fans, so
Yes.
I can't like those Raiders, but that Allegiant Stadium is one of the coolest stadiums I've ever seen. And that's really neat that you got to experience that.
Yeah,
That's
it
pretty
was it
cool.
was awesome. It was awesome for
Well, I
sure.
think that is a great place to leave this conversation. And I appreciate you coming on the show and having this conversation with me. And I got emotional in a couple spots, but I think we made it through all right. So
We did. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that. It's been fun.
awesome. Well, I'm gonna sign off now. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later.
See ya.